Hi everyone and welcome to Twisted Talks. I'm Josh.
I'm Tanya.
And in this week's episode, Tanya is going to be taking the lead with a crime case.
I'm going to burn the ears off you.
Exactly, that's exactly what we want. So, I'm excited for my dog to stop causing a ruckus.
Yeah, you might hear the dog throughout this. It's too hot for them to be outside today, so they're just chilling with us here.
They have joined us. But anyway, moving on, I suppose now over to you, Tanya, to get cracking on the case.
So today I am covering the case of BTK, or Dennis Lynn Rader. So I suppose I can just kind of dive into it, really.
Wherever you see fit to start.
Are you very familiar with this case?
I'm not familiar at all. I did absolutely no research apart from Google the name once and found an article with an interesting headline that I'll mention at some point.
Okay. So our case starts on January 15th, 1974, when Dennis Lynn Rader broke into the Otero family's home in Wichita, Kansas. He told the family that he was a wanted criminal and that he wanted food, money and a car, but unbeknownst to the family, a nightmare was about to unfold. So Dennis Rader threatened them with a knife and a gun, and in the home was Joseph Sr. and his wife Julia.
Why would you even, who brings a knife when you have a gun?
He wanted to be prepared. As well as two of their children, Josephine, who was 11, and Joseph Jr., who was 9. Now I do want to give a trigger warning if you are upset by anything to do with children, child murder or anything like that. This episode might not be for you, and that's okay. Just
zoom on to the next one
and we will speak to you in a different one. So Josie, as she was known, the 11-year-old girl, was kind of Rader's primary target.
Okay.
So he later said, when he was apprehended, Hispanic people just turn me on, and that he was attracted to younger women.
That's not even a woman.
Mm-hmm. Bear in mind, she's 11.
That is a girl.
That's an 11-year-old child.
That is more than likely a
prepubescent.
That's the one.
Yes. So, as I said, Rader had a knife and a gun. He made the two children watch as he murdered their mother and father in their bedroom. He strangled their mother, Julia, before wrapping a plastic bag around their father's head and tying it with a cord to suffocate him.
So that's terrifying and obviously horrific as well for the children to see.
Yeah.
I think even that's nearly more so just as bad as the actual murders of them is making the children watch.
And he then wrapped 2 t-shirts and a plastic bag around Joseph Jr., the 9-year-old boy's head, pulled up a chair and watched as this little boy suffocated to death.
Just left him there and just watched.
And then Rader described Josie as his encore. So he took her to the basement, stripped her and asked her for a camera because he wanted to take pictures. Josie told him there was no camera in the house and then asked him, what's going to happen to me?
So you've brought a gun and a knife, and the gun is probably more than enough, but you forget a camera.
So I think what I'm thinking is this is his first murder. So he probably didn't think when he was creating his, as he called it, hit kit.
He was on a murder giddy bang.
Didn't think he'd want a camera, and then got there and was like, I'd love a camera. So she asked him, what's going to happen to me? And then he replied, you'll soon be in heaven with the others. Rader had already prepared a noose strung over a sewer pipe. He put a gag in Josie's mouth before hoisting her up and hanging her. And then, this is quite graphic, as she died, this sick fucker masturbated.
That's disgusting.
And he said it was a sexual release for him. He then tidied the home, took Joseph Sr.'s watch and radio as souvenirs, and drove off in their car and left it parked up outside a grocery store.
God forbid we don't take some personal belongings with us.
Now, as awful as all this was, what makes it much more awful for me is that the family had 3 older children who were at school that day.
So they came home to this.
They came home and found their parents brutally murdered in their bedroom. The children had initially thought that their parents were playing a practical joke on them. And then police, I read that the oldest son was asking police to take Josie and Joey out of the house so that they didn't have to see. And then the police had to inform them that Josie and Joey were also murdered. Yeah. Rader sent a letter to a TV station, KAKE, admitting responsibility, writing that he wanted to be known as BTK, an abbreviation for bind, torture, kill. In October of 1974, an editor at the Wichita Eagle newspaper got a phone call that led him to a letter hidden in an engineering book in the Wichita Public Library, which read, and I quote, "I did it myself with no one's help. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK." So then...
Clearly planned. A lot
Yes.
of planning to some extent anyway, if he wants to do all this fucking code names and shit.
Yes, so he clearly had this idea in his head for a while.
Whether it was his first time or not, there was definitely some premeditation.
So that was in January 1974. And then on April 4th, 1974, Catherine Bright, who was 21, arrived home to her house where Dennis Rader was waiting for her. Now, with the Otero family, he had expected that Julia would be home, and I think he kind of knew that the two younger kids would be home, but he wasn't expecting the husband to be home.
To be there as well, so
But that didn't stop him.
But he still did what he did.
And similar to that, he was surprised to see Catherine arrive home with her younger brother Kevin, who was 19, but proceeded with his plan anyway.
He seems to just be interested as long as it's women and children.
So he jumped out, taking them by surprise, pointing a gun at them, and once again claiming that he was a wanted criminal and needed food, car, and money because he was heading to New York. He made them go to Catherine's bedroom, where he forced Kevin to tie his sister's hands and feet before taking Kevin to another room where he tried to tie him up, but Kevin fought back, getting very close to taking the gun from Rader, but unfortunately not close enough, and Rader was able to get a good grip on the gun in the end and shot Kevin in the head twice. After this, he returned to Catherine to finish his project, because that's what he called his murders. He called them his projects.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Take photos for the school slideshow.
As he called his murders. Catherine fought bravely for her life as he strangled her, to which Rader responded by stabbing her multiple times in the abdomen. He later said at trial that he was disappointed that he had to resort to stabbing her because his method of killing was strangulation. While this was happening, Kevin, who had survived the gunshots to the head, was able to escape.
That's awful.
Yeah, 2 shots to the head and he survived. Was able to escape and run to his car in search of help, but unfortunately, after multiple emergency surgeries and blood transfusions, Catherine died and Kevin was in critical condition, but he did survive.
Well, that's good. Was there any information as if, is he okay, or was there maybe brain damage? Or I'm assuming he must have been somewhat okay if he managed to run out.
Yeah, nothing that I could find. Now, Rader didn't kill again until March 17th of 1977.
So we're looking at
3 years.
3 years. And I suppose we don't know for sure that he didn't kill between those 3 years.
Exactly.
We just know that nothing's obviously, I'm assuming, being identified as him in that period.
Now, he was very open about his murders, and
so it wouldn't
you will
make sense.
see as this case goes on, he liked to taunt the police and taunt the newspapers with letters and talking about his crimes.
It just seems so weird for someone who's clearly a psychopath and sadist.
A sadist,
Yeah, didn't do anything for 3 years.
Yeah. So Rader didn't kill again until March 17th, 1977. He had originally planned to go after a woman named Cheryl that he met at a bar, but lucky for Cheryl, she wasn't home. Instead, Rader spotted a young boy named Steve Relford. He spoke briefly to Steve, showed him a picture of his own wife and son, asking if Steve knew where they were, to which Steve replied no, and he went home. Later on, Rader knocked at the door and pretended to be a detective, and I think it was Steve, the child, let him into the home where there was 2 other children, Steve's siblings, and his mother, Shirley Vian Relford.
So straight into an ideal situation for him, for
Yes.
Dennis.
So Shirley Vian Relford was 24. Rader switched off the TV, drew down the blinds, and then Shirley came out of one of the rooms and was immediately startled by this strange man in her home. Rader locked the 3 kids in the bathroom and told Shirley he was going to have his way with her. He then informed her that he wasn't going to rape her, that that's not what he meant, and calmed her down by giving her a glass of water and smoking a cigarette with her.
Are we serious here? Like, yeah, I'm going to do unspeakable things to you and you're probably going to end up dead. But, you know, let's have a fag, let's get to know each other.
Smoke a fag first.
You know.
Let's bond. As the terrified children screamed in the bathroom, he tied Shirley up and strangled her to death with a cord. Similar to the Otero crime scene, he left semen behind at the scene, this time on Shirley's panties, which were left next to her body. Rader stated that...
He's clearly not pushed about DNA.
Well, this is the 70s.
Well, I suppose that's true as well. They
DNA,
wouldn't have anything like they have now.
DNA wasn't at all what it is now. So Rader stated that he had intended to kill the children too, but the phone rang and kind of disturbed him, so he left them screaming in the bathroom. Poor Steve witnessed his mother's murder through a crack in the bathroom door.
That's awful.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I suppose it's kind of one of those things where if you're one of the kids in the bathroom, it's like you don't want to look, but you can't help but look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, kind of, especially you're trapped. Yeah. What else are you going to do?
You can't.
And children, regardless of what the situation is, are naturally curious.
Yeah. And like that must have been a horrific thing for him to see.
Yeah, that's traumatic to say the least.
So then in December of 1977, Rader became obsessed with 25-year-old Nancy Fox. He began stalking her, and on December 8th, he cut her phone line and broke in through the back door of her home.
You know, it's a really good thing nowadays, actually, that we actually, you know, have mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
So that if the mobile phone is cut, it's
cut
like...
the phone lines a lot.
I can still call for help. Whereas back then, it was mostly phone lines.
Mostly
back then.
landlines.
I think they had the first mobile phones by then, but they were just these big chunky things that most people didn't have.
No, that was kind of the 90s.
That was the 90s,
yeah.
was it? Okay.
He began stalking her, blah, blah, blah. So Nancy lived alone. So she was completely blindsided when Rader confronted her with a gun. Rader told her that he had a sexual issue, and the only way that he could get rid of it was if he tied her up and raped her.
I think he should be tied from a ceiling and hung by his you-know-what.
Now, as far as I can tell, he kind of got off more on the murders themselves. I don't think, as far as I know, that he actually raped any of his victims.
Yeah.
He allowed Nancy to partially undress herself in the bathroom before forcing her into the bedroom, where he tied her up, undressed her fully, and then started to strangle her. As he did this, he confessed who he really was and told her about the murders that he had committed. And again, he left semen at the scene on her nightgown, which was found next to her body. The next day, on his way to work, he called the police and said, quote, "Yes, you will find a homicide." That's how it was written, not homicide, a homicide. At 843 South Pershing. Nancy
so it was
Fox,
I'm assuming he purposely spelled it that way.
No, he said this. So he said to them, "You will find a homicide."
Oh, this was an audio call, like an actual... Okay, yeah. Jesus.
Nancy Fox, that is correct, end quote, and then left the receiver dangling. So I'm assuming he made this from a payphone.
Yeah.
The police tried many times to find a voice match to the recording of this call, but were unsuccessful. In early 1978, Rader sent a sarcastically written poem titled Shirley Locks, which was kind of a play on Jack's snoring, which was kind of a play on a children's nursery rhyme called Curly Locks. So he sent that to the Wichita Eagle newspaper, and it read, "Shirley Locks."
Curly Locks like our version of Goldilocks?
I have no idea. It's like a nursery rhyme.
Okay.
I just can't cope with his snoring. He's
yeah,
so
I don't
cute.
know. I'm trying to figure out if the microphone's picking it up. He's such a loud sleeper, that dog is. He's old, so he gets a pass.
The poem read, Shirley Locks, wilt thou be mine? Thou shalt not scream, nor yet fee the line, but lay on cushion and think of me in death and how it's going to be." This was followed by a more serious letter where he took responsibility for his past 7 murders, because he's already at 7 now because the Otero family was 4 people.
Yeah.
And claimed to be driven by something he called Factor X, which he said was a supernatural element that also motivated Jack the Ripper, the son of Sam, and the Hillside Strangler. And soon another letter was found in which he mocked Nancy's murder with the phrase, "Oh death to Nancy," mimicking an American folk song called "Oh Death." So then in 1979, Rader became obsessed with Anne Williams, who was 63, and waited in her home intent on killing her.
He's extremely diverse with his age ranges.
However, he became absolutely livid. That's what he said himself. "I was absolutely livid," because he waited for hours and hours and hours, but she still had not returned home from visiting friends, and so he left. So Anne had a very lucky escape.
Yeah, had she returned home any sooner, bye-bye Anne.
Mm-hmm. So then his last murder was Nancy in 1977.
And how many are we on now? Is this 8 or 9?
7. So Nancy
So
was
that was number 7, sorry.
Yeah. So he didn't kill again until 1985.
Okay.
So by 1985, Rader was 40 years old and ready to resume killing. On April 27th of that year, he had selected his next victim, Maureen Hedge, who was 53 and had lived on the same block as Rader in Park City, Kansas for 30 years.
So we're not even going far this time.
No,
we're popping across the road.
He's going for a neighbour.
Yeah.
Rader, who at this point in his life was active in his church and was a Boy Scout leader, left a scout meeting early claiming that he had a headache. He bought a beer at a nearby bowling alley, swished it around his mouth, spat it out, and purposefully spilled some on his clothes, giving the illusion to passers-by that he was drunk. He called a cab and asked the driver to take him to Park City, which is where he lived. When he
and
got
also
to,
where this woman lives as well.
So when he got to Maureen's home, her car was in the driveway, and so he assumed she was home. He cut her power line and went inside. She wasn't home, so he waited in her bedroom. Maureen arrived home with a man, so Rader waited in the bedroom closet until 1 a.m. so he could be sure the man had gone and that Maureen was asleep. Then he...
That's commitment.
Then he turned on the bathroom light, jumped on top of Maureen and began choking her. Once he had killed her, he dragged her body out to the boot of her car and drove her to his church, where, because he was a trusted member of the church, he had keys to the building.
Oh, of course. What? Of course.
He put black plastic over the church windows, and then that was so nobody could look inside.
Yeah.
And I read that he had those materials ready and waiting, so he had planned this.
The church part of the trip was intentional.
Planned, yeah. So he then dragged Maureen's body to the basement, where he took photos of her in various bondage positions.
That's disgusting.
And then he dumped her body in a ditch.
And she was dead when these photos were being taken in these positions.
Yeah.
And I'm not religious, but not only is that disrespectful to the victim, obviously.
Sacrilege.
Is that the word for it?
Sacrilegious.
Yeah, it's just so disrespectful to, I wouldn't even, I'm not religious, but I wouldn't even, I wouldn't do anything out of the way in a church because I might not agree with it or be on board with it, but I don't disrespect
other people's religions.
And
this is his own religion.
Even.
This is his own religion. He's an active member of this church.
Yeah. Yet
he feels comfortable enough taking photos of a woman that he has murdered in bondage positions inside the church.
What was that? Do you know that thing? Thou shalt not kill thy neighbour.
Oh,
yeah. You know that one?
Yeah.
I think you forgot.
One of the commandments, I'm sure.
I think so.
So he then dumped Maureen's body in a ditch near their homes in Park City.
So once again, not even disposing of the body far away.
He is confident.
He's going to his neighbour.
He's
dumping his neighbour in the neighbourhood. And not only that, he's gone out of his way to go from the neighbourhood to the church, back to the neighbourhood, all this time with a dead body.
Yep.
That's ballsy.
Yep. It is. So the next victim, Vicky Wegerle was the next victim. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Wegerle.
Your guess is as good as mine.
So Vicky Wegerle was the next victim to catch Rader's eye. He would regularly walk by her house during the daytime to hear her play piano. And at 10 a.m. on September 16th, 1986, Rader posed as a telephone repairman to gain entry into Vicky's home.
Ironic enough, seems he's the one who always cuts the lines.
Once she had let him in, he cut the phone line.
Oh, wow.
And said to her that he was going to tie her up before forcing her into the bedroom at gunpoint. As he attempted to tie her up, Vicky fought back and left scratches and cuts on the Vicky. Rader stopped her from fighting by choking her to death with a rope. After which, he took pictures of her body in different positions before stealing the car from her driveway. Vicky's husband Bill later said that he saw his own car going the opposite direction of their house after the murder, but he could not identify the driver. And upon arriving home, he found their 2-year-old son alone and his wife in the bedroom. Vicky was rushed to the hospital. But
so there was a 2-year-old son in the house as well while this was happening.
So Vicky was rushed to the hospital, but sadly was pronounced dead after a few hours.
Okay.
While all this was happening, while she was being rushed to the hospital and, all that, Rader disposed of the evidence, parked the girl's car a few blocks away, and went home to change his clothes.
Just another day.
So by 1999, Rader had realised that older women were more vulnerable based on his past murders. So he chose 62-year-old Dorothy Davis, who lived a mile and a half away from him. He had a very well thought out plan for this. He was due to go camping with his Boy Scout troop for the weekend, and on January 19th, 1991, he made an excuse to slip away from the camping trip, and he drove to his parents' house, changed out of his Scout uniform, and then drove to Park City to complete his plan. He parked his car at the Baptist church and made his way to Dorothy's home on foot. He broke in by throwing a cement block through a glass door at the back of the house. He once again...
He's getting a bit louder about his entries.
He once again told Dorothy, who had come out of her bedroom to investigate the noise, that he was a wanted criminal looking for food, a car and money. He tied her up in her bedroom and strangled her before placing her body into the boot of her own car, again, and driving to a lake near Park City, where he hid the body and the evidence under some trees. He then drove the car back to her house.
So, like, we're not even going to be smart enough to wrap it up, attach bricks to it and put it in the lake. We're just going to leave it. We're going to go all the way to the lake and just leave it in a bush.
Just wait. He then drove the car back to her house, wiped it down for fingerprints because now he's concerned about forensics.
Yeah, because having your cum all over the place
isn't
and your
an
fingerprints
issue.
all there with it, more than likely, definitely is not an issue. Like, you've done it all along. If you're going to get caught from DNA, you're going to get caught.
Yeah. So he wiped the car down for fingerprints and returned to the church, collecting his own car, before retrieving Dolores's body and dumping her under a bridge in Sedgwick County.
So now we've gone back to this lake to get the body from the trees or the bush.
Yep.
And go elsewhere to where did you say?
A bridge in Sedgwick County.
To go to a bridge.
Yep.
And do you know, is this a water running under the bridge or just...
I think it was, yeah. Okay. But she wasn't in the water.
On the bank kind of thing. Yeah. So once again...
Yeah. So then he changed back into his Scout uniform and returned to camp with the Boy Scouts. So he murdered this woman, did all that, and then went and hung out with the kids. Sat around the campfire telling scary stories.
Being a good member of the church.
The next evening, he went back to the bridge to take pictures of Dolores's body. So we know he loves his pictures.
For God's sake.
So his first victims were in 1974. Dolores was his last victim in 1991. That is a lot of years.
Yeah.
So then just a little bit of backstory on Dennis Rader. So Dennis Lynn Rader was born March 9th, 1945 and was one of 4 sons. Both of his parents worked long hours and barely paid attention to their children, which Rader says made him feel very resentful, especially to his mother, as he felt ignored by her. Which, that excuses everything. Everything. Mammy didn't pay me enough attention, so I murder women and children. So, from a young age, Rader displayed disturbing traits. He would fantasize about torturing trapped and helpless women, and would torture, kill and hang small animals.
That's disgusting.
He often spied on female neighbours while dressed in women's clothing and would masturbate with ropes or bindings around his arms and neck. Later, as he was cooling off between murders, he would take pictures of himself wearing women's clothes and a female mask while bound. He later admitted that this was him pretending to be his victims as part of a sick sexual fantasy. Now, I also want to mention, Rader served in the US Air Force. From 1966 to 1970, he was a staff sergeant. So
up until not long before he started doing all of this.
He was married with 2 kids, and by all accounts, he seemed like a very normal, polite and well-mannered man.
Apparently, so did they all.
All knew him.
Yeah.
So he kept this side of him very well hidden.
Yeah.
Nobody had any inkling that he was doing this. Like, his wife didn't know. His wife, when he eventually got caught, his wife was granted an emergency divorce, which is where... you don't have the waiting period, you're just instantly divorced, which... Understandable. I'd divorce him too. So from 1991 until 2004, BTK was quiet. But on the 30th anniversary of the Otero family murder, the Wichita Eagle newspaper, which is the newspaper that he was contacting all this time, ran an article about what had happened and about him, and also an author named Robert Beatty released a book about the murders. Now this angered Rader because he felt like they were trying to tell his story.
But they weren't him.
Exactly. So on March 14th, 2004, Rader sent a letter to the newspaper using an alias of Bill Thomas.
So we're
Kilman.
going as recent as 2004 and he still hadn't been arrested at this point or anything like that.
Yeah. So the alias he used was Bill Thomas Kilman.
Kilman, original, very
And
creative.
also the initials are BTK.
BTK, yes.
He included with the letter 3 photocopied pictures he had taken of Vicky Wigirl and her driver's license and signed it the same as he had all his previous letters. This letter was sent to the FBI and the investigation was reopened and hit the internet and newspapers because obviously the internet was a thing at this point.
Yeah. 2004 we had the
dial-up.
Yes,
Making
couldn't
that
play
horrible
my
noise.
Club Penguin while Mum was on the phone to my aunt in England because only the house phone or the internet could be used at the same time.
Yep. Nuisance. The
Yeah.
cheek of her. Another letter was sent on May 5th, 2004 to KAKE TV, and this was a word puzzle. So on June 9th, he left a package taped to a sign in the middle of the city, which was a gruesome description, of the Otero murders and included a sketch of a hanged dead body titled "The Sexual Thrill Is My Bill." Yeah.
This man's rhyme is his crime.
Yep. On June 17th of the same year, another package was found at the Wichita Public Library labelled BTK. In the letter... Okay, Jack, I'll pet you. In the letter, Rader said time was running out for him and he wanted to wait for the right time for his next hit, indicating that he was planning to kill again.
Yeah.
So on October 22nd, another message from Rader was found by a UPS driver. This included...
And is this 2004 still?
Yes, this
I
is
find it quite interesting as well because I know there's still been a lot of developments since 2004 in forensics and DNA and all that, but even in 2004 they were still fairly good now compared to... Good then even, compared to what they would have been when he started off.
Exactly.
So like
he started in the 70s.
Do you know, I just don't understand how like... I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it,
Yeah.
like when you put it into perspective.
Because like that's... While, yeah, when you think about it now being 2022, 2004, yeah, it is a long time ago. It's what, 18 years. But...
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm old.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, it is. But yeah, no, it's just... Like, you see that as being such a modern time compared to the 1990s and 80s and 70s, where this kind of thing, even though they still go on even now to this day, but people just... I'm not trying to... poke the bear that's Dennis, but I would have thought that people as stupid
As him. Oh, he's about to
would
get
have
stupider.
been caught much
Just you wait.
sooner, especially in entering the 2000s.
So, let's continue. So, this package that was found on October 22nd by the UPS driver included a collage of children with bindings across their faces and bodies and an autobiography that listed false details about BTK, such as the year he was born and where he had lived. So he was trying to mislead the police essentially by giving them fake information.
Making up a character, essentially.
Yeah, of, Bill Thomas Kilman. Rader was made the president of his church council in Christ Lutheran Church.
What an actor he must be. Or is he genuinely that religious?
Clearly not.
You know what I mean? I'm like, you don't practice it properly if you are.
Practice what you preach.
Delusion.
So then 8 days after this, a special case cereal box with BTK and bomb written on it was found in a pickup truck. Inside was information on Rader's projects or his murders with even more misleading information. And additionally, there was a question.
In the box.
He was asking a question to the police.
Why do you think they'd give you an answer? And if they were to give you an answer, why do you think they'd give you an honest answer?
Do you want to know what the question was?
Oh, of course.
This question. Rader asked the police if he made and sent them a floppy disk, would they be able to trace it? Police obviously said no.
But they could, I would assume.
They said, no, of course we can't trace it. Send it on.
See, I'm really glad that I only just mentioned stupidity because that was almost a premonition of how stupid it was about to get.
So police obviously said no. And On January 25th, 2005, so we're into 2005 now.
Yeah, already.
Rader sent directions to another serial box to KAKE TV again. So this whole time he's kind of communicating with the police, the Wichita Eagle and KAKE TV. They seem to be his kind of go-tos.
Yeah.
Inside this cereal box was a doll with a rope around its neck tied to a pipe, which was a simulation of 11-year-old Josie Otero's murder because he had hung her over the sewer pipe in the basement.
Yeah.
The 10th clue...
So he's really remembering the details of every... Because that was one of the first ones, wasn't it?
Was the first murder that he committed.
We're already at... When did you say he started? 1974?
Mm-hmm. So this was
so
the
this
murder
is already...
1974.
At this point, this is nearly... Like, he's referring to something that was almost 21 years ago.
Yeah.
If it's 2005, that's crazy.
So... The 10th clue that Rader sent was a postcard on February 3rd, 2005, stating that he was going to send a floppy disk, which he did 13 days later.
Because the police told me they can't track it.
Exactly.
And the police would never lie to a serial killer, so obviously not. I can trust them.
Like, in his mind, he had a rapport with the police, and the police weren't going to lie to him, because I think in his mind he thought they were buddies, he thought they admired him.
Oh, do you know what it reminds me of? Do you know those people who get shitty with like public servants or like anyone who's on the government? Yeah. I pay your wages, so you need to. He's almost like, I give you cases.
I give you
we're buddies
to solve. We're friends. I'm doing this, and you're.
So you tell me the truth in exchange. Fuck off, man.
So police immediately analysed the floppy disk, and were able to trace it back to the Christ Lutheran Church, and could see that it was made under the name Dennis. After looking up the church,
stupid.
He's an idiot. After looking up the church, they found the name of the president.
Dennis
Rader.
Bing bong.
They drove past his home in an undercover car and recognised his black Jeep Cherokee from past security footage. They asked his daughter for a DNA sample, saying it was for a medical record, but really they wanted to test it against the semen found at the crime scenes. And finally, after 30 years, he was caught. And on February 25th, 2005... I knew that sperm was
going to come back to haunt him. I said it.
On February 25th, 2005, the Wichita Police Department surrounded Rader's car as he ate his lunch at work and arrested him. 30 years.
I mean, he got away with that for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Like, he was committing murders between 1974 and 1991, and he would have committed another murder in 2005.
Yeah, he was leading up to it.
He was getting ready.
I just find... almost what you could, I suppose, call self-control.
A lot of
self-control in terms of some of the large gaps between...
Because during his cooling off period, he was reliving it all through his 6 sexual fantasies, and then when that wasn't enough for him anymore...
It was time to go again. But like that, there is obviously a lot of control there, though, because a lot of them are quite significant gaps. Mm-hmm. Whereas you see with a lot of serial killers and stuff like that like once they have their first one, there's the cooling off periods after each victim after that normally tend to get shorter and shorter
because it's not doing as much for them.
Yeah, so like, that it might be to kill someone, 6 months later kill another person, 4 months after them next person. It normally seems to get shorter and shorter until it's quite frequent and they're caught.
Yeah.
But this guy was quite erratic in his time frames.
Yeah, absolutely. So after he was caught and arrested, Rader gave a 30-hour confession.
I suppose it is a long time frame to cover.
Yeah. Where it seemed to police that he was proud of his actions. He spoke highly of his crimes and he liked the publicity it had given him. He didn't realise until his mugshot was taken that police were not on his side. He fully thought the police were going to help him get away with
we're just finding out so that we can help you get away with it. We just want to do a documentary.
Yeah.
And off you go then. Next year, you're doing the next one soon? Oh yeah, hit us up then so we can get the story first.
He's a thick.
For someone who's so, I suppose, in a way, managed to not get caught for so long.
Like he was meditated and calculated in his crimes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was his need for publicity and his need for attention.
It's like this weird narcissism, but it's not just
he got
narcissism.
Himself caught.
Like,
he was a fucking idiot. He got himself caught with that stupid floppy disk.
I don't think he has enough, like, in a way, as
Brain
narcissistic
cells.
as it seems, I don't think he has enough self-preservation to be considered a narcissist.
No.
It's like more sociopathic or something. Or psychopathic.
So, police searched his home and found his mother lode, which contained the original BTK letters, victims' driver's licenses, photos he had taken.
Mother lode, is this just meaning stash kind of a thing? Okay.
Photos he had taken of his victims, cutouts from newspaper articles, and artwork. So, like, drawings and things that he had made about the crimes and things like that.
His fan art.
Yeah. On July 27th, 2005, the court case began. Rader confessed to all 10 murders in detail and showed no remorse. No remorse, no guilt. Didn't feel bad about it whatsoever.
Okay.
Family members of the victims gave impact statements telling Rader of the hatred that they have for him and how devastated they are that they will never be able to see their loved ones again.
And I'm assuming still not one shit given.
After this, Rader was allowed to speak. He was supposed to issue an apology, but basically spent 20 to 30 minutes just rambling, talking about himself.
Okay.
Like, I'm sure the judge later likened it to an Academy Award acceptance speech.
That's disgraceful.
Yeah.
Like, he would have been better off just not saying anything.
Yeah.
For his sake as well.
Yeah. So on August 19th, 2005, Judge Waller sentenced Rader to life in El Dorado Correctional Facility with no eligibility for parole until 2180.
So, R.I.P.
In
Dennis.
total, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with a minimum of 175 years.
And I'm sure 10 life sentences, I'm sure that's like 20 years. Sorry, 100. 200 years.
Yeah, it's 10
The math
life,
wasn't
like,
mathing there for a
He
second.
basically got sentenced to a life sentence for each life that he took.
Yeah.
So it was actual justice. So he's still in prison to this day.
But I don't understand with the prison system why a life sentence doesn't actually mean life. It's just a lot of time.
Yeah, a lot of time. 175 years minimum. So I'm pretty sure he's still alive. He's in his 70s. He's still in prison to this day. But like, that's all the information that I have on the case now.
It's just like, that's, you know, it's the fact that he doesn't have any remorse and, as you say, like, sounds almost proud of what he's done and delighted, almost happy to be telling his story. That's so, like, so psychopathic.
What gets me is that first murder that he committed, that was a family annihilation. Like, that was 4 people.
You wiped out a whole family.
Exactly. And I suppose it probably was easy enough to control the parents because the kids were in the house. But, like, he just went for it. He didn't ease himself into it. He just went for it with a full family murder.
Yeah.
And then
it was all or nothing, like
it didn't stop him in the slightest if he was surprised by someone else coming into the house.
Yeah, because like
with the exception of Maureen Hedge, when that man came home with her and he waited it out.
Yeah.
But then with Anna Williams, he got sick of waiting and he left.
So it's like, you'd wonder as well, was there something that made her like special to him in a sense that she was worth waiting for and the other person wasn't?
Yeah.
It's just he's a bit all over the place, really.
So in total, he murdered Joseph Julia, Joseph Jr. and Josephina Tero, Catherine Doreen Bright, Shirley Ruth Vian Relford, Nancy Jo Fox, Maureen Wallace Hedge, Vicky Lynn McGurl, and Dolores Arlene Johnson Davis.
It's like, and there's all that I find interesting compared to a lot of serial killers, his MO. The ages are all over the place.
He had no specific victim type.
Okay, fair enough, females seem to be fairly specific, but he had no issue with if a male happened to be in the way, like in the family.
He would.
He would do it.
And the fact that he fully intended to kill Shirley Vian's kids as well.
Yeah.
Like, if not for that phone ringing, those 3 children would also be dead.
Yeah. Like, they were quite literally saved by the bell. But, and actually, what I find interesting, especially after all of the kind of him not showing any remorse, completely happy, thinking the police are his pals when he's confessing for 30 hours, making sure I'm supposed to give him a detailed account how great he is.
He went into detail, like he was proud of this.
Like happy as a pig in shit, as they say. But like one of the articles I found, because I literally just googled his name, I literally just typed in BTK into Google and just clicked the first thing that came up out of curiosity, you know, just see was he still in jail, that kind of a thing. So I didn't really know anything, but this headline got me, and it's an article on the Daily Mail, and its headline is BTK serial killer Dennis, is it Rader or Rader?
Rader.
Dennis Rader, who murdered 10 people in 20-year killing spree, describes himself, quote, as a good person who did some bad things, unquote, to a forensic psychologist who exchanged letters with him in, quote, code, quote, new docuseries reveals. How are you a good person who did some bad things? Does he think he's a good person because he was president at church?
He's president at church. He's a father of 2. He was in the Air Force. Like, I am a good person at my core. No, you're not. You're a piece of shit. You murdered kids. You murdered women. You murdered a family.
Yeah.
And you thought you were going to get away with it. You thought you were so fantastic that the police weren't going to catch you. And in the end, he was his own downfall with that fucking floppy disk.
Yeah.
Because he didn't think that the police would lie to him.
Like, why would you?
He thought that what he had done was more important than justice.
Yeah.
For
he
those
thought
families.
he was above the law.
Yeah.
Which is a bit ridiculous. And you said, who was it? He served it? Was it the Navy or the Army?
US Air Force.
The US
between
Air
1966
Force.
and 1970.
The US Air Force. And like as well, to find it it's quite funny because if you're serving for the Air Force or the Army, anything like that, you're essentially serving the country and the people within the country. But then you're off killing the people that you were serving.
Yeah.
To protect.
Exactly.
You were serving to protect your country and people, and some of these people you're just like, I fancy a bit of bit of murder.
Yeah.
You know.
He's just a piece of shit.
If I'm bored, I meditate, read, watch some Netflix. You know, I don't
annoy my boyfriend.
You know, these kind of normal people things, or relatively normal people things anyway.
Because we're normal.
To an extent.
Well, like, we're not fucking murderers.
Exactly. But then again, that's setting the bar fairly low.
I don't get bored and think, you know what, I'm going to go down the road there and kill one of the neighbours. I think that'd be fun. Do you know, alleviate the boredom.
Ooh, spice my day up.
Yeah, like...
If I want to spice my day up, I'll make spicy tofu or something.
You're a piece of shit, Dennis.
Mm-hmm. But, I just, apart from the fact that he's clearly a psychopathic piece of shit, I don't really have any much more to say. Case closed, stay in jail.
Rot in hell.
Exactly. Thoughts and prayers to all the loved ones.
That's the thing, like, he killed 10 people, and those 3 older kids of the Otero family had to be taken in by, I'm sure, one of their fathers, because their father was in the military as well.
Okay.
Got taken in by one of his military buddies, and he became their guardian. So they lost out on having their parents at their graduation,
everything,
at their prom,
their siblings as well,
the birth of their kids, their weddings, all that. Kevin Bright had to watch his sister die. Steve Relford had to watch his mother be murdered. Like,
there's a whole trail of
it's
trauma
not
left
just the murder
behind.
Victims, it's the people that are left behind to
There's
deal
so
with the
much
fallout of these crimes. It's just, fuck you, Dennis.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Sometimes, like,
hope your dick falls off.
Exactly.
So that is the horrible case of BTK and all the people that he murdered.
And so that was definitely an interesting one, and I must say I'm glad I didn't do any research actually, because it's much more interesting to just listen and respond
and hear it all for the first time.
So I guess thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.
Once again, it has been a pleasure, and we will
speak to you soon.
Yes. You will hear us again. We will hear you again. No, we won't hear you. Unless you send us voice notes. You can actually go onto our Anchor page and submit voice notes if you want to leave us a message.
Talk to us. We're lonely.
You know, or even if you want to suggest a case or anything. Also feel free to head over to our Twitter and our Instagram. Both of them are
Twisted Talks
Pod. And if you have any
thoughts, opinions, case kind of suggestions, we would love to hear them.
Let us know. Like we said, there's the voice message way, or there's the Instagram and the Twitter, and you can also find our email on the Anchor Instagram page.
Oh, the Instagram page.
It might be on the Anchor page as well, but it's on the Instagram page definitely anyway. But yeah, with that, ciao for now.
Bye.
Hasta luego. Bye.
Slán.